This video will show you how to create a bar chart that looks like this using R, the open source and very powerful statistical programming language. So if you're not accustomed to creating charts, I recommend following these steps. First, just create a quick mock-up. It doesn't have to be fancy. You can just take a pencil to paper and draw out what you want the chart to look like. And then that will help you identify what variable should go along the x-axis and what variable should go along the y-axis, so that you'll have an idea of how to map these variables onto the chart. And then you'll also know how you need to aggregate the data, if at all. So with that, we'll jump right in. For this video, I'll be using R version 4.1.2, the dplyr package version 1.0.7, and the ggplot2 package version 3.3.5. And if you don't know why that's important, please check out the video that I made on understanding R packages. So we'll start out by importing the customer A data CSV. So that has 20 observations and 193 variables. And then we'll load the dplyr library or package. We'll also load the ggplot2 package. And then the first thing that we need to do is we want to take the data frame, which is customer A data. And in this case, what we want is we want to create a bar chart where along the x-axis, we'll take a look at this customer A data here. So in particular, we're interested in income, for which individuals can have an income between $0 to $8,000, $8,001 to $15,000, etc. And then we're also interested in a few different variables, but the one that we're going to use for the bar chart is the average credit score. So we want to calculate the average credit score by income level. So of those individuals that have greater than $45,000 income, what is their average credit score? And we want to do that for each level of income, and then it's the average credit score that we want to plot along the y-axis of a bar chart, and then along the x-axis we're going to show the different levels of income. So that's the plan. So we know right now we need to aggregate these data, and so what we'll do is we'll take the customer A data frame, and then we will group that data frame by income, and for that we're going to use the group by function in the dplyr package. And then the next step is we're going to take that same object that we've now grouped by income. And if you don't know how this works, check out the video that I made on aggregating data in R. And so now that this data frame has the data grouped by income, we're going to now take that new data frame and we're going to calculate a few summary statistics. The first one is going to be number of customers. And for that, we're going to just take the number of records within each income level, because this data frame is grouped by income. And then we're going to calculate the mean credit score, and for that we're going to use the mean function and specify na.rm is equal to true, telling it to remove any missing values when calculating the mean. And then we're also going to calculate the proportion of customers who are satisfied by taking every record that by taking the mean of satisfaction score greater than or equal to 9, which means it'll calculate a proportion here, because this statement will be either true or false, which correspond to a 1 or a 0 respectively, and then we take the mean of that to get a proportion. So once we do that, we have a smaller data frame here. We'll take a look at that, and this is what it looks like. It's only got 5 rows because there were 5 levels for income. And then we've got number of customers. There were 4 customers in each of these income categories. And then we've got an average credit score. That's the thing we're going to end up plotting through the bar chart. And then we've got proportion satisfied. So you can see, very few of these people were satisfied, and specifically only about 25% within this category of $35,001 to $45,000 income. Again, all of these data are fake. They're just simulated data. So because we want income here, which right now is a character, because we want this to be a factor that has specific order to it, 0 to 8,000 should be the lowest category. The next one should be 8,001, the 15,000, etc. We're going to run this line of code here, which will take this data frame. It'll put it in this mutate function from the dplyr package, and we're going to recreate the income variable using this factor function for income. So we're going to take the income variable that's a character here, turn it into a factor using the factor function, and we're going to give it the argument levels. And then here we'll give it this list here, which specifies the values in the order we want them to appear. So once we run this, if I take a look at this file again, now we see that this is in fact a function. So it's done that here. Now we'll get into the creating of the actual chart. So here's a good time to tell you that the Ggplot2 package, the GG in Ggplot2 stands for the grammar of graphics, and this reflects the idea that this Ggplot2 package really comes from this philosophy that any graphic is inherently a collection of different related parts. And the way Ggplot works is that you keep layering different parts on top of one another to arrive at a particular graphic or a chart. So in this case, and you'll see what I mean by that. So in this case, we're using Ggplot2 functions all along here. This first piece is using the Ggplot function. What this function takes is we specify the data that we're going to use, and in this case it's data equals aggregate by income, or aggregate by income, which is what we created here. And then we use this aesthetic function. It's AES and then parentheses. And what that does is anytime you see AES within one of these functions, what it's doing is it's mapping a particular variable that you have in the data set to a particular argument within that function. So in this case, we're saying the x-axis is going to be mapped to income and the y-axis is going to be mapped to average credit score. So you see why I said earlier that you want to plan out, you know, what's going to be on the x-axis, what's going to be on the y-axis. You will have to specify those directly here. So if I just run this, you'll see that what it's done is that it's created this chart. Along the x-axis, you have income. You can see these values that we specified in the order that we specified them because we used the function. We turned income into a function here. And then along the y-axis, we have average credit score. So it mapped income to the x-axis and average credit score to the y-axis. What it has not done is put anything in the middle of this chart. To do that, you have to add on that layer. So you could take this and then put dots in there, right? Like these little points, or you could create a bar chart, which is what we're going to do. Or there's other types of things you can put in to represent the relationship between these two variables. The next thing we're going to layer on is this function called geom_bar for a bar chart. And that comes from the Ggplot2 package. And we can specify the statistic we want it to represent or to show. In this case, we're saying identity. So we just want it to reflect the Y value that we've specified here. So if I layer that on, and now I run these two things, the original ggplot here where we mapped income to the x-axis and average credit score to the y-axis, and now we're layering in with this plus sign the geom bar, and I run that, now we see that we have these bars here. So now while we may look at this and say we've accomplished our goal and we've got a bar chart with income on the x-axis and average credit score on the y-axis, we might say, okay, well, you know, there's a few other things that we would like to do. And one of the things that I like to do for customers is I'll put a label on top of the bar charts because sometimes it's hard to eyeball what these bars represent in terms of the quantity. And so to do that, we can add another layer using the Ggplot2 package, and in particular the geom_text function. And what this will do is it'll allow us to add text to the graph. And so because what we want to do is we want to map a variable that's in the data set to these bars here, we have to use the AES function within there, and we're going to say label is the argument. Label is equal to, and we will use the average credit score because we want to use the average credit score as the label for these bars. So if I highlight this and run it, this is what we get. But of course, now we've got these decimal values here, and I don't want that. Let's say I want whole numbers here. So what I can do is I can wrap this average credit score with parentheses and use the round function from the base package. I want to round the average credit score, and then one of the arguments that takes is digits equal, and then I'll say 0. So I want to round it to the nearest 0 decimal places. So this will make it a whole number. And then if I highlight that now and run it, we've accomplished that goal. we now have numeric values as labels that correspond to the average credit score. One of the other things that I sometimes need to do is clean up the labels used for the x-axis and the y-axis, because these are just taken directly from the data. So what I will do is add on another layer, and I'll use the labs function from Ggplot2. So Ggplot2 : labs, and then I'll say x, labs for labels, which means the x-axis label, equal to, and I'll just specify in double quotes the text income, or I can say customer income, and then comma y equal to, I'll say average credit score, but this time I'll have spaces in between them, unlike what's in here right now. So now if I highlight this line and run that, this is what it looks like. Customer income on the x-axis, average credit score on the y-axis. The final point I'll go over is sometimes you want to manipulate the text of these labels. By default, it tends to like align with the halfway through the bar here, so that half of the number is on top, half of the number is below. Maybe that's a little bit difficult to see for people, and so what you can do is you can manipulate values within this geom_text, because this is the part that relates to these labels here. And so what we can do is within this function geom_text, outside of the AES, I'll put in a comma here, outside of the AES, but within this function of geom_text, which places that right here. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to find the place to put in a comma that's right outside of this function here, and that's just right here. So I'll put in a comma here, and then I can use this property called vjust, which stands for vertical justification, I think. So I'll say vjust equals, and so this is an argument for the geom_text function. Vjust is equal to, and you can play around with some of these numbers. I tend to use numbers, like -1, 0, 1, and that will influence whether, by how far these numbers are above the bar or below the bar. So if you say 1, for example, and then run this whole thing, after running that, we see that that value of 1 for vjust dropped the number down below the bar. If we give it a value of -1 and run it, see that it raises it above the bar. That's a nice feature to be able to have. Now, to give you an idea of how flexible Ggplot2 is, so sometimes I want to have the number below the top of the bar, so within the bar, and if I do that here, because the bar is gray, you can see that the text is black and it's within the bar and the bar is gray. So maybe that's hard to see. And so I can actually go ahead and change the color of the text to make it stand out more. So within this geom_text function, I can specify next to this vjust color equal, and then in parentheses white. Or not in parentheses, in double quotes, white. And if I run this, it's now changed it to white. So you can change virtually any aspect of the plots that you create or charts that you create using Ggplot2. That's one of the reasons that it's my go-to package for visualizations in R. If this video was helpful and you want to learn more about how to create various charts and perform different data analyses using R, please subscribe.